Former Liberal MP Adam Vaughan claims that a photo from a Pierre Poilievre rally was photoshopped. The media blame Will Smith's Oscar slap on intersectionality, Disney tries to sexualize little kids, and the Trudeau Liberals were flat out lying when they told you about their carbon tax schemes. It's Fake News Friday. I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is The Candice Malcolm Show. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into our Friday podcast where we focus on the media and how they distort things, how what they are telling you is not true. And today we're going to do a bit of a deeper dive into the culture as well, because there's so many interesting cultural things that happened in the past week that we want to talk about. So joining me as usual is my producer, Harrison Faulkner. He's a journalist here at True North and a producer on the show. Harrison, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Candice. Happy to be here.
Okay, so this is kind of a funny one. We know that Pierre Poilievre, he's running for leader of the Conservative Party, and he has been having these rallies that are very well attended. It's interesting. He was on my show last week. He told me about how he was having big crowds at his rallies, and this is becoming true everywhere he goes. There is a huge interest, especially among younger Canadians, interested in what he has to say. But for some people on social media, liberals on social media, they just don't believe him. They see a big crowd and they instantly think that it must be fake and that it must be photoshopped. So you brought this one to my attention, Harrison. Adam Vaughan. The reason we included this in Fake News Friday, by the way, is because so often the legacy media takes their cues from liberals on Twitter, usually people like Gerald Butts, sometimes people like Adam Vaughan, making these claims, and then lo and behold, a few weeks later, we'll see this storyline coming up in the legacy media. So we wanted to cover this one today. Harrison, why don't you walk us through this story?
Yeah, so as you said, Adam Vaughan is sort of one of these useful leftist Twitter personalities for the media now that he's no longer a sitting MP, and he really made a mess of this tweet here. Pierre Poilievre held a rally in London, Ontario. I believe it was a noon rally on a Monday, and it was packed in this place in this sort of hotel conference room, and it was completely packed to the brim, and no one has really seen this in, I think, mainstream conservative politics at this level for a leadership race. Anyway, Adam Vaughan basically wrote on Twitter that the people in the images of Pierre Poilievre's rally were photoshopped in. And he writes on Twitter, one of the hardest parts of Photoshop is getting the shadows right. They're all in the same room, or are they? He questions. This many shadows from different angles is odd, especially when sunlight outside is backlighting the range of exposures and angles. And then he compares the photo, to Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, the Beatles album cover. So my first reaction to this, Candice, was that for a liberal like Adam Vaughan, who had never seen a crowd this large, they must have been trying to figure out how this could possibly be the case, how someone could possibly be attracting all these people to hear them speak, because for them, they're not used to that. They're probably used to the range of 20, 25 people. This looks like it's well into the hundreds, Candice. But I want to go through quickly some of the Twitter reactions and then throw it back to you for your thoughts on this. But our own Andrew Lawton really went after Andrew Vaughan for this. On Twitter, he basically took a photo of a green screen studio and said, "Wow, Adam Vaughan, look at the size of this crowd out for Pierre Poilievre," which I thought was quite funny. And the head of Rebel News, Ezra Levant, basically responded to Adam Vaughan saying, "This is a very odd conspiracy. What an odd thing to go down, and to try and paint." And obviously, Adam Vaughan was quickly debunked because videos of the event had surfaced, and it was clear that no one was photoshopping anyone. This was just a made-up, weird conspiracy from the Liberals. And Candice, I think they're panicking a little bit.
Well, it's sort of a strange accusation, because we all know, Photoshop is not that sophisticated. It's really hard to get Photoshop right. And the thought that some volunteers on the Pierre Poilievre campaign would have the time to go out and put that together. The reality is when you're in a big ballroom, there's lots of different lighting, right? It depends on where you're standing. And some people are maybe right under a chandelier, and so they'll have more light on their face. Some people might have light from like a side light. And the idea that some liberal is sitting there dissecting this and convincing himself, like, to me, it sort of shows the complete paranoia and almost psychosis of liberals sitting on Twitter, that they imagine things and they're so confident in their imagined perspective that they're willing to put it out there, thinking that they're going to get validated or something like that. Well, yes, this former Liberal MP was thoroughly debunked because he's delusional if he thinks that someone's going to go out and Photoshop. And yes, of course, the reality is that Pierre is quite popular, and I think that is a real threat for the Liberals. He's got a lot of attention, a lot of people very enthusiastic about his campaigns. People are showing up, and if I were a Liberal, I would be worried too. I don't know if I would go to the extent of trying to create a conspiracy theory to try to discredit them. There's probably better ways to do that than to pretend that some backroom operative is sitting there like copying and pasting people and putting them in an image. There's much better ways to spend your time and energy as a conservative operative than that. But I think you're right. I think it shows a broader threat to the Liberals, to Justin Trudeau's time in office and his time as Prime Minister. And if Poilievre can keep up the momentum, and if the Conservatives can continue to stay on track with hammering Liberals and their weakness, I think that this all poses a very real threat for Justin Trudeau. Okay, Harrison, I really want to talk about the Oscars because it sort of dominated the news cycle this week, and there has been a lot of iterations on this slap, this big moment from the Oscars. It's interesting because I think when I was growing up, like in the 90s and 2000s, the Oscars were a relevant cultural institution. The films that would be nominated were films that everyone would have seen. There were Oscar viewing parties where people would go and they would watch all the movies that were nominated for Best Picture, and then you'd watch the Oscars itself and find out who won. The last few years, I can't say that I've even heard of any of the films that were nominated. They've really gone down a woke intersectional path focused on the most obscure sort of anti-American films that no one's seen, films that don't really resonate with the public. And so because of that, these are kind of award shows where you just see very arrogant, elite Hollywood stars basically lecturing the public, talking about how their morals are superior, even though their morals are so off base, so removed from where the sort of typical everyday North American is in terms of their values and their culture. There's just this dichotomy that's happening where people are just tuning out. No one's watching the Oscars. No one pays attention. I saw clips here and there, and it was just so cringy and so embarrassingly bad. They were like obsessed with this Florida bill, which we're going to talk about a little later in the show, that they call the Don't Say Gay bill. Really, it's just a bill protecting very small children from being indoctrinated with a very radical sexual ideology. Anyway, the Oscars are just so irrelevant. This year, though, something different happened. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. There's this crazy scene where Chris Rock was out there making a pretty tame, mild joke about Jada Pinkett Smith with her haircut. Apparently, he didn't know that she suffered from alopecia, which makes her hair fall out. So Jada Pinkett has her hair very short. He made a very tame joke about it. I didn't see anything wrong with the joke. In fact, when they first cut to Will Smith after the joke, he was laughing. He was laughing at the joke, right? And then all of a sudden, you see Jada Pinkett Smith's face. She gets angry, and Will Smith just like loses it in a very, very shocking way, right? This idea that someone tells a joke about your wife that you don't like, and you go up and hit them. Harrison, it almost seems staged. I don't know. When I see it, it's like, how did this even happen? I know some people felt that way too. That it seems surreal because it was just so bizarre. But it sort of goes with this leftist idea that words are violent. And so words that are hurtful are violent, and therefore you can respond to words that you don't like with real violence. And then that's sort of where we have come as a culture. So there's just so much about this scene and what happened here that's so much evident of where we are as a society, where we are as a culture. What did you think about this moment at the Oscars?
For me, there's two things about this that I think need to be addressed. The first is that every time I see it, it just looks fake. I don't really understand how this actually occurred. It's two actors that might be part of it at an event that nobody is watching, at an event in which they are desperate for attention and relevance, because frankly, people are sick of hearing political diatribes every time someone wins an award, and every time some fake comedian or has-been goes up on the stage to try and make jokes, which inevitably end up just being, lame liberal talking points. But the CBC, of course, never missing an opportunity, Candice, to jump on a cultural issue to push their agenda. The CBC wanted to make sure that this incident actually was looked at through the lens of course, some sort of racial, intersectional lens or whatever. So I want to just quickly go over the points of this article because it's insane. So the CBC writes that the Oscars incident raises questions about bad male behavior, says Black community advocate. And it claims that Smith's slap on Rock runs the risk of inspiring racist tropes when it should raise questions about toxicity. So we're going back to the old toxic masculine behavior or whatever they want to try and bring back up. And then the article writes, conversation should be directed more toward toxic male behavior. Tolu Ilaboye, an advocate within Winnipeg's Black community, said the episode raises questions about the acceptable limits of insult comedy, celebrity privilege, and the propensity of men to use violence. And then just for good measure, Candice, at the end, of course, they write that comedians need to be more sensitive in their jokes, because that's really what the problem is here, that comedians are being too harsh. The article writes, Winnipeg comedian Emmanuel Lamuro said the incident should also make comics err on the side of caution if they're ever tempted to punch down at people. So there you go. I guess that's the standard they want to set. But really, Candice, no one is watching this stuff. No one cares about the Oscars anymore. And I think they're just so desperate for attention. And it's kind of obvious to see why. I mean, the wokeness has reached a whole new level with these people. I think it's turning people off for all the right reasons.
Well, it's one of those things, too, that the kind of idea of the Oscars has become like a parody of itself. And so they get a host that comes up and sort of gently pokes fun at all these very privileged, very elite people in the room. And we saw it throughout. I know that there was jokes about several other people in the room. That's typically what they do. They just go around the room and kind of make very light, gentle jokes at, like, whether it's Kim Kardashian or Leonardo DiCaprio. And it's kind of like, if you're going to be a high profile celebrity, you have to be a little bit self-deprecating and recognize your extreme privilege so that you can kind of take a joke, right? And so the idea that Will Smith couldn't handle this joke. Well, again, I emphasize the point that he laughed at first, and then it was his wife that really couldn't handle it. She didn't like it at all, and so she gave her husband a look, and then all of a sudden he went up there and really, really overreacted. I will point out that I don't know exactly how much longer, but later in the evening, I think it was like very shortly thereafter, like 20 minutes later, Will Smith won an Oscar and he received a standing ovation, right? So the people in the room didn't even see anything wrong with his behavior. They didn't punish him in any way. He was out at an after party later that evening dancing and partying, and you told me he was singing his own rap song.
Dancing to his own song after winning an Oscar. I mean, how
much
more?
Clearly had he clearly had no sense of regret or remorse, right? He was on cloud nine, and so again, yeah, this is where we are as a culture. We can't take jokes. We can't even joke about things anymore, and everything boils down to intersectionality and toxic masculinity. I mean, the guy was defending his wife who was upset. He wasn't upset. His wife was upset. So I'm not quite sure how you get to toxic masculinity from there, and anything about how this had a racial element is so absurd, Harrison, because Chris Rock and Will Smith come from the same sociocultural background. They're both about the same age. They're the same race. They have the same background. They're the same status. They're equally as famous. Like, trying to put the race element on here just doesn't really work. But again, it shows you how obsessed our culture is with things like race and privilege and the whole woke mindset. And again, I think that's why so many people are just tuning out. Like, we would not be talking about the Oscars today had it not been for the fact that Will Smith slapped Chris Rock. Otherwise, this is just totally culturally irrelevant. Well, one of the other themes that I did notice at the Oscars was just this obsession about this Florida bill. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this today too, Harrison. It's such an interesting, just a complete difference between how a conservative government in Florida is governing when it comes to children's education, with Ron DeSantis in Florida passing this bill called the Parental Rights in Education Bill, which the media erroneously call the Don't Say Gay bill, even though the bill isn't about gay per se. It doesn't even have the word gay in it. It's more about parental rights in protecting little kids. We're talking about children aged kindergarten to grade 2, I believe, or grade 3. So like 5 to 8 year olds in primary school. You compare that to what's happening here in Ontario, Harrison, where we also have a conservative government with Doug Ford, and they are pushing a totally opposite bill, Bill 67, focused on inserting CRT and critical race theory and racist division into our schools. So it's kind of a sad picture that conservatives in our country don't stand up to the woke indoctrination in education, whereas in Florida they do. But anyway, Ron DeSantis, the culture, the media, the Hollywood elites, basically everyone in the media is really taking his bill out of context and saying that it's doing something that it isn't, trying to make it seem like it's bigoted or homophobic or it's going to suppress gay children. We're not talking about teenagers here. We're talking about very little kids, and yet there's still this total obsession with opposing this bill. What do you make of all this, Harrison?
Well, the left's reaction to the entire bill, in my opinion, has been a clear example of the left protesting too much, making it, they're really, really fighting this. And anyone who actually knows what's in the bill knows exactly, as you said, Candice, that this is about not forcing sexual leftist indoctrination onto kindergarten to grade 3 students. Anyone who is promoting that, I think, has serious issues. But the idea that this needs to be fought, as the left is trying to do, as companies like Disney are trying to do, is very bizarre. It's one of those examples of, why are you protesting this so much? What is with it that really makes you want to push this stuff onto young kids? And I think people need to look into that. And as you said, Candice, the contrast between the way that some conservative governors, some Republican governors, because not all Republican governors in the U.S. are taking the fight to the radical left as much as Governor DeSantis is, but the way that someone like Governor DeSantis is handling these radical leftist bills and attempts to change his state, compared to the way that we're getting the way that a supermajority PC government in Ontario is doing, it's unfortunate because, as I said to you yesterday in one of our meetings, Governor DeSantis is providing a roadmap for conservative premiers in the country as to how to handle these attempts by the radical left. So we're getting in Canada, we're learning what the opponent is trying to do, and we're seeing exactly how we should combat this sort of thing. And I hope that these are that notes are being taken and that something is going to be done about this in Ontario, because if it's happening in Florida, this is exactly what's going to happen in Canada eventually. And so it's just disappointing to see that we don't have the same quality of leadership. But as I was saying before, Candice, the left is really, really pushing back on this Florida bill. And there were some incredible clips that were released by Christopher Rufo, who has really kind of made his mark in documenting the CRT, critical race theory world, and the radical left, and kind of showing the world what these people are saying. And so I want to get into these 2 Disney executive board meeting clips because they're really, really insane. So the first clip is from the corporate president, Carrie Burke, who talks about how her, as a mother of trans kids and of a pansexual kid, she really wants to see more engagement from more LGBTQ characters in Disney stories. So let's watch this clip and get your reaction to it.
I'm here as a mother of 2 queer children, actually, one transgender child and one pansexual child, and also as a leader. And that was the thing that really got me, because I have heard so much from so many of my colleagues over the course of the last couple of weeks, in open forums and through emails and phone conversations. And I feel a responsibility to speak, not just for myself, but for them.
How brave.
To all of us. We had an open forum last week at 20th where, again, the home of really incredible, groundbreaking LGBTQIA stories over the years, where one of our execs stood up and said, we only have a handful of queer leads in our content. And I went, what? That can't be true. And I realized, it actually is true. We have many, many, many LGBTQIA characters in our stories, and yet we don't have enough leads.
So, Candice, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, that's just, what can you possibly say about that?
Well, like there's so much to unpack there, right? So the idea that all of these people are so adamantly opposed to Ron DeSantis's bill because they want sexual indoctrination of little kids, like not kids that are like about to hit puberty or post puberty when like they need to start being educated on sexuality, but we're talking about little kids, and that's the purpose of Disney. Like I have two little kids, 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. I took them to Disney World last year, and the purpose is to enjoy like the magic of childhood and imagination, not be indoctrinated with this ideology, Harrison. And even like what she's talking about, I had to Google pansexual. I've never heard of it. I don't know what that means. I don't understand how you can have a child that's pansexual. I legitimately don't understand what the difference between pansexual, which as I learned from Googling is just someone who's not restrained by sexuality and they may be attracted to all kinds of different types of people. That sounds like maybe someone that's bisexual to me, but regardless, we have this new proliferation of all of these different sexual identities, this ideology that is being promoted by these people. Why would you have to have 50% of your characters identifying as this long like laundry list of different sexual orientations? Again, we're talking about little kids. We're not talking about teenagers. We're not talking about adults. We're talking about little small children who don't need to be taught at all about sexuality. So the fact that this is a priority from Disney, to me, I think that the left is really just jumping the shark on all of this. Like they're so out of touch with the everyday person, with the everyday parent, and they think that like they're encouraging each other that this is like a winning issue for them, and they need to just like keep marching forward. I don't think they're realizing, Harrison, how much they're galvanizing normal parents and everyday parents against them. Because again, like I have little kids. I'm not going to just let them turn on Disney. I mean, I don't think I would have in the first place. But the idea that a lot of parents just put their kids in front of, they turn on the TV and let them watch Disney. That's how I grew up, watching Disney movies. And, the idea that we would just like let our little kids watch a station or a network where the corporate president talks like this, it's really wild.
Yeah, the corporate president who has a pansexual child and a transgender child. That's the way she describes him. I think that is basically all the evidence you need to know about where this company is headed and what they're doing. And it gets even crazier, Candice. So that this same journalist who found that original clip also found a clip from an executive producer. And I'm not even going to explain it. I'm just going to play it in full so we can react to it. It's unbelievable. This is the executive producer of Disney. Her name is LaToya Raveneau. And this is what she had to say in her board meeting.
It's like, I love Disney's content. I grew up watching, all of the classics. They have been a huge, informative part of my life. But at the same time, I worked at small studios most of my career, and I'd heard, you hear whispers. I'd heard things like, they won't let you show this at a Disney show. And I'm like, okay. So I was a little sus when I started. But then my experience was bafflingly the opposite of what I had heard on my little pocket of Proud Family Disney TVA. The showrunners were super welcoming. Meredith Roberts and our leadership over there has been so welcoming to my not at all secret gay agenda. And so I feel like I felt like it was, maybe it was that way in the past, but I guess something must have happened in the last they're turning it around, they're going hard. And then all that momentum that I felt that sense of, I don't have to be afraid to like, let's have these two characters kiss. Let's in the background. Like I was just wherever I could, just basically adding queerness to like, if you see anything queer in the show, I'm proud of it. But like, I just was like, no one would stop me. And
So no one was trying to stop her, Candice, when she was just trying to add queerness in every aspect of Disney. And there it is. She admits it. Her not at all secret gay agenda. So why any parent would subject their kids to a modern Disney movie when these people admit to you what they're doing is beyond me.
I completely agree. It's like she's so giddy and so excited about inserting her sexual ideology into programming meant for small children, meant for little kids who are, the purpose of these Disney films, the purpose of all of this entertainment is just, the magic of childhood and being innocent and discovering. And the idea that they're trying to essentially brainwash or insert their ideology, adding queerness, adding gay kisses, like the idea that they think that this is their role, this is what they think that parents want from them, or that parents are going to be continuously willing to accept is pretty wild. I wanted to bring up this poll, Harrison, because it's really interesting. This is Gallup did comprehensive poll. This is Americans, not Canadians, but I'm sure that there is something similar. I'm sure the numbers are almost identical, but you can go through the generations and look at the proliferation of people who identify as LGBT, right? So you look back at like my parents' generation, baby boomers, 2.6% of people born between 1946 and 1964 identify as being LGBT. Gen X, 1965 to 1980, 4.2%. So we're steadily doubling with every generation. Millennials, my generation, born between 1981 and 1996, 10% identify as being LGBT. And then your generation, Harrison, I don't know what happened, but Gen Z, those born between 97 and 2003, 20%, so 1 in 5 people in your age group identify as being LGBT. So all of this is just to say that this idea of sexuality and how you identify, it's being heavily pushed on people, and it's working. This not so secret gay agenda is working in making people identify more and more as LGBT, as gay. They're pushing queerness, and it's having a real impact on the way that people live their lives. Those are staggering numbers just in the lifetime of people alive today, how much that has grown and how popular it is. So sometimes we talk about how all of this cultural push to insert these kind of views in little kids, it must be turning off parents. There's no way that they can possibly be winning this cultural war. But then you look at those numbers, and it's pretty clear that they are encouraging so many people to live in a lifestyle that's very, very alternative. And it's not just happening in the US. I mean, we found this example of drag kids from CBC. They put out a documentary of small little kids who participate in these drag shows. We're talking about kids aged 9 to 11 who go out and very, very, very sexualized, performing as again, little kids. This is the kind of thing that we used to protect children from. The Canadian media were all over promoting it and defending it. We had stories in the Globe and Mail, stories at CBC, CTV, talking about how important this is and how it's not inherently sexual, and that the people who oppose it are basically just bigots. So this whole idea that children, it's like fair game to sexualize them, it's fair game to indoctrinate them with an ideology, and this is where we are as a culture. It's so disturbing for me as a parent, and it's so prominent. It's great to see people in Florida, people like Ron DeSantis, conservatives, starting to push back. I hope that there is more pushback against this kind of stuff in Canada as well. Okay, Harrison, I want to shift back to Canadian politics for a minute here, because there's a pretty big news story that most media outlets just completely glossed over. So the Parliamentary Budget Officer put out a report saying that despite what the Liberal government had claimed, despite what Trudeau said over and over and over again during the 2021 election, most households will see a net loss as a result of the carbon tax and the carbon tax rebate. So we heard Justin Trudeau say throughout the campaign over and over again that the carbon tax will not hurt families, will not hurt the middle class, and that most people will be better off because they're getting a rebate. Catherine McKenna, who is a former Liberal Environment Minister, said that 8 out of 10 households will be better off because of the carbon tax because they were giving this rebate. Well, that is not true. That is not true at all. The Parliamentary Budget Officer, you can't have a more official refute than that. They said that no, this is not true. Trudeau is lying during the election. Most Canadians will pay more as a result of the carbon tax. You know, it's so interesting, Harrison, because I know we talked about this during the election, but when it comes to the media and the role that they play in Canadian politics, they focus so heavily on fact-checking and holding the opposition to account. Anything a conservative says, they will fact-check, they will dig in, they will try to find some small little point that's off to make it seem like they are not being honest. When it comes to Liberals' claims, though, they basically take them at face value. They don't scrutinize them. They don't make them explain them. And then here we have 6 months later, it turns out that what they were saying was completely false, and you barely even hear about it in the legacy media. It's such a double standard. It's such a failure to hold to account the powerful people in our society. I know we've had this conversation before, but what do you make of the fact that the Liberals just completely, they don't have the same kind of accountability in the media as the other political parties?
No, you're exactly right. We've seen this so often. This is the way it goes. The Liberals will make a promise. They'll make a promise that is obviously pie in the sky thinking, but it sounds good and it makes for good headlines for the media, which they pay off. Then, once, X amount of months play out, then the actual people who know what's going on, the Parliamentary Budget Officer, or in another example, the Ethics Commissioner, right? Then they come in, refute the Liberal claims, prove to people that what the Liberals are telling you is not actually true. You're not going to actually get money back from this carbon tax scheme. All that's going to happen is just going to be a net loss for you and a net loss for the Canadian economy. But once those reports come out, people, the majority of the Canadian population aren't checking the Parliamentary Budget Officer's report. So the media knows this. As long as they don't cover the actual, the facts after the claim has been made, then it doesn't matter because it works out for the Liberals. So the media gets what they want, the Liberals get what they want, and as you said, Candice, the opposition is held to a far harsher standard. And that's just a constant that I think politicians in this country and Canadians should come to realize, that the cards are stacked against the Conservatives and the opposition in this country, and those that pay up for the media, shockingly, get better headlines and get better coverage.
Yeah. It's almost like the Trudeau government pays the media. Oh wait, they do. Well, Harrison, it's April 1st, so none of this has been an April Fool's Day joke. It's all very real, sadly. One other thing that is real, that is, as of today, the federal carbon tax will go up. So there is a 25% increase in the federal carbon tax, going up a total of $50 per ton of emissions. So you expect to pay about 2 more cents at the pumps per liter of gas. Also, the members of parliament, MPs, will give themselves a pay raise as of today, because we've got hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars in debt and deficit, and here we have politicians giving themselves a raise. Why not? That's sort of the magical world of budgets will balance themselves. Justin Trudeau's fiscal policy, he doesn't think about monetary policy. Remember, he told us that during the election as well. So Canada's finances are a complete and total mess, and they are just going to get worse. The pocketbook issues, people are going to start paying more for everything, and it's one of the things, just to go full circle, is why so many people are showing up to Conservative rallies. So many people are, excited and enthusiastic about someone like Pierre Poilievre, who is really talking about this stuff and bringing it to the forefront of the national conversation. It's because Canadians are sick and tired of the amount of money that they're paying. And again, as of today, they're paying even more. So, Harrison, thank you so much for joining us here on Fake News Friday. It's always fun to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here, Candice. Thank you.
All right, that's Harrison Faulkner, True North journalist. I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is The Candice Malcolm Show.